please continue enjoying your lunch. Martha and I will get started here. If you just turn around a little bit here, Martha, so that we can see each other. And it's a little bit like Keystone Cops today, but that's not your fault. But anyway, so Martha, let me just say before we get started that after the lunch today, we're going to have Martha's book for sale out in the front, and Martha will come around and sign it. It is a wonderful Christmas present for yourself, or any kind of holiday present, late Thanksgiving present. It's wonderful for you. It's also wonderful for anybody in your family and any of your friends who want to know how it really works over at the Casa Blanca, because you've probably lived there longer than any president, right? How many years have you been down in the basement?
Well, I've been there since 1995.
Okay,
on a pretty regular basis. But I first came into the White House in December of 1975.
But not residing, not as an embed.
No, not as frequently. But I did come in fairly often through the Carter administration and into Reagan.
But the real turning point was when you got your hard pass, right?
Well, the hard pass I've only had for a little while.
But
I had other ways of getting in before that.
But for those who might not know the significance of a hard pass, please share.
A hard pass is a pass that lets you come in as a regular correspondent, and you can come in any days of the week and during certain times, and it's issued for 2 years, and then you're up for another renewal. But that's the normal way that reporters get in. But there are other ways of getting in too. So if a reporter is just working on a White House story, then they can come in on a daily basis, and they simply call the press office and tell them what their news organization is and provide their social security number and their birth date, and they can come in that way. And I came in that way for a long time.
But you like having the hard pass a whole lot better, don't you?
Well, it's a little easier.
You can come and go as you're not quite invincible, but almost. But how many years did you focus on this one book? How many years went into it?
I date it back to 1995. I say 12 years. My editor says he thinks that it's closer to 25.
Now, since you rely so much on numbers, how many people did you interview?
I've not tallied it up. Way over 100.
Way over 100. Both inside and outside.
So I've interviewed. I try to interview people while they're in office. So if I'm interviewing a chief of staff, I want to do it while the chief is there. And one of the times that I found particularly fruitful for interviewing is at the end of an administration, when the only thing that people are worrying about that last month is getting a job outside the White House. And they're very reflective at that time.
Yeah.
One of the best sets of interviews I think I did was in 1977 in January, December of 76 and January of 77, when people who had worked for Nixon and Ford were leaving the White House, and nobody cared about them, and people were not coming around and interviewing them, and many of them were quite reflective, like Dick Cheney, who was the chief of staff. His interview was, I did one that was a couple of hours, and he was very reflective about his time and about how the White House works.
Sort of begs the question. I would imagine there's a lot of that going on right now.
No, I think it happens.
Or are they just a different cut? It's later still?
Yeah, it's later still. It's right at the end, because at that point, at the end of an administration, then people have a stake in their own legacy, not just the president's legacy.
And you think they're still working for him right now?
Yeah. So they're thinking a lot about their own role and what they did and what they accomplished, and that's the time when you want to get people.
And your chief focus is the relationship, the dance between the communications part of the executive branch of the government and the media who cover them.
Yes. Well, I'm interested in how the whole communications operations work, because communications is so central to governing. And a president puts a lot of time and thought into it, and so does his staff. He has a very large communications staff, and he needs it, really.
Does it really come from the president? in all instances?
I think that White Houses reflect a president, that his strengths are their strengths and his weaknesses are their weaknesses. So in this administration, for example, the president does not like to spend a lot of time explaining his policies and what he does. He would rather state than explain. And I think you've seen that in the lack of people coming to the briefing room explaining the various initiatives the president has. If you go back in the Clinton administration, you'll see that on a regular basis, you had people, the cabinet secretaries would come in the briefing room, like Donna Shalala would come in and talk about policies that were involved with Health and Human Services. Henry Cisneros came in on housing all the time, Riley on education. And if the president had an initiative, they would come in and do the fleshing out of what the policy involved. And in this administration, you only see it, recently you see more of a trend of that since Dana Perino has become a press secretary. She has been more interested in doing it.
What does that tell you about Bush?
So to me, it says that a couple of things. I think in a good portion of his administration, he believed, or his staff believed, that there was one newsmaker. And that newsmaker was the president. And the president is the one that gets the attention. It's not staff.
Was his father the same way?
I don't think he was as interested in publicity.
And that it being about him as much.
Yeah, I don't think he was as interested in publicity altogether as the son is.
Which president, how many presidents back do you go?
Well, I started following in Ford.
Okay.
Yeah.
So of the presidents that you looked at for this particular book, which one would you say was the best at articulating to his communications staff what he wanted the message to be?
I think that would be Reagan. But Reagan came in with very
That's
clear,
interesting that you think that's really.
He came in
because he didn't come across
ideas.
that way to.
Oh, I think he came in with everybody knowing.
But the image of him was that there were people behind the scenes giving the actor his lines, and you're saying no.
Well, I'm saying that everybody knew what he was about and what his agenda was coming in. One of the things that I did, I've used presidential libraries in addition to interviewing people. And in the Reagan Library, I went through some of the speeches and looked at what his role was, particularly looking at files that had marginal notes. And in his speech to Parliament, you can see the additions that he made a difference as far as the tone of the speech, and he had a wonderful sense of language, and the words that he put in were very euphonious, and so he really had the speech move very well. He was he knew the craft, and he knew how to deliver a speech and put a lot of focus on it. He talked to his speech writers. I remember someone talking about in the Bush 1 administration, one of their jobs was to look at the teleprompter, to think about in terms of the teleprompter when the president gave a speech, to make sure that the whole sentence was on one teleprompter screen, so that it didn't have to go on
so
to
you
another.
Have to deal with punctuation.
But I noticed in the Reagan Library, among the things that are in the records are the teleprompter screens.
As it actually looked to him.